Christmas Past by Glenice Crossland. Read by Maggie Mash.
Michael, you must let her go. It will be the making of the girl.
Mick O'Connor made no response, and the priest tapped his fingers on the oilcloth-covered table in frustration. He tried again.
It's just what Mary needs. The finest fresh air, nourishing food, and most of all the treatment for her TB glands. Roland Roberts is a fine doctor, he stressed. She should be getting the treatment she needs here, from our own doctor, in her own home,
Mick O'Connor said. Maria O'Connor gave her husband a look which spoke volumes.
Yes, we know she should be having treatment here, Mick, and we all know why she isn't getting it. Because nothing's been paid off the doctor's bill since our Michael was born.
She broddled the poker through the shining black-leaded bars and riddled the ashes vigorously into the pan below.
£1 shilling a week is all it would take. Just as I was saying, the priest continued, Roland Roberts will give Mary a course of injections which will put her right in no time. Besides, she'll have a room of her own.
Young Mary O'Connor had been supposedly engrossed in a library book, but she gave Father Flynn her full attention at the mention of her own room.
After all, the boys ought not to be in with the girls for much longer.
Mick O'Connor shuffled nervously in the straight-backed chair. Father Flynn was right as usual. Although his sons Bill, Jimmy and Michael were younger than their three sisters, it wouldn't be long before the sleeping arrangements would have to be looked at. Maria had told him often enough, not that she nagged, though the Lord knew she had good reason to do so. Oh no, she wasn't the type of woman to nag. Too good for the likes of him was Maria. He would have to mend his ways, keep off the beer, and move them out to somewhere better. If he had but known it, the same thought was going through the mind of every other person in the room. His wife Maria was mentally exhausted by trying to make ends meet, and had been driven to waiting at the pit gates on a Friday in order to get her hands on the housekeeping money before the nearest pub landlord did so. Even so, if Mick had run short of beer money by Monday, he would help himself to anything left in her purse in order to finance another day's drinking. A collier's Monday, they called it, and it was rare for some of the miners to turn in for work on the first day of the week. God only knew how Mick had kept his job. Still, he was said to be the hardest grafter in the pit on the days he did turn in. It made Maria seethe inside to think of the money wasted on beer when they could have moved out of the Row and into somewhere large enough to house them all comfortably. Young Mary, at the tender age of 16, and a few years older than Nora and Kathleen, was having visions of a room of her own. To begin with, she hadn't really wanted to go and live with the doctor friend of Father Flynn and his wife in a village somewhere in Yorkshire. She had begun to panic at the thought of leaving home and travelling halfway across the country. Admittedly, the thought of leaving the employment of the awful Mrs. Brown and her 2 pampered daughters had been tempting, but not tempting enough to persuade her. The promise of a room of her own was another matter. Mary had begun to dread the time of the month when her periods began. Smuggling the blanket squares in and out of the bedroom was difficult enough, but if the bleeding started unexpectedly during the night, hiding the blood-stained sheets and nightie was virtually impossible. In fact, only last week, young Michael had asked if she had cut herself, and sent his older brothers off into a fit of giggles. Another thing Mary hated was the thin wall against which she slept. When her da had been drinking, he never cared how much noise he made, or how the bedhead knocked against the wall when he did things to her ma. Mary would draw the blanket over her ears and pray that her ma wouldn't become pregnant again and overcrowd the house even more. Then she would have to go to confession and tell Father Flynn about her sinful thoughts. She blushed when she remembered some of the things she had revealed to the good father about her family. Oh, she did wish her da would keep off the beer. She loved him dearly from Tuesday to Friday, when he had no money left and came straight home from the pit. Black as hell's kettle was how her ma would describe him. There he would sit in the old tin bath in front of the fire, whilst her ma scrubbed him with the hard brush. But even the scrubbing brush and carbolic never managed to remove the blue slivers of coal embedded in his flesh. Father Flynn's thoughts were taking a
Sample complete. Ready to continue?